My name is Michael Harris. I'm 57 years old, and everything I thought I knew about my family was shattered the day we gathered to hear my late wife's will. It should have been a solemn, respectful moment, a chance to honor the woman I loved for 3 decades, but instead, it turned into a battlefield I wasn't prepared for. I watched my son's eyes burn with a hunger that chilled me to my core, and in one single sentence, he revealed exactly what kind of man he had become. That was the day I realized my life would never be the same again. Backhand index pointing right before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The lawyer's office was tucked inside an old brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled faintly of dust, old books, and polished wood. I remember sitting in the waiting room that morning, my palms damp against the arms of the leather chair. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been, but grief and anticipation twisted inside me in ways I couldn't untangle. My wife, Emily, had passed away 3 weeks earlier. The pain was still fresh, raw, cutting through every breath I took. 30 years of shared mornings, late-night conversations, and quiet laughter were suddenly gone, and I had been stumbling through the days like a man lost in fog. And yet, here I was, about to listen to her final words through the cold recitation of legal documents. My son, Jason, sat across from me, scrolling on his phone as if he were waiting for a football game to start instead of his mother's will. He was 30, sharp-dressed in a tailored suit he couldn't really afford, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who thought the world owed him something. Beside him sat his wife, Melissa, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She avoided meeting my gaze, as though she already knew what was coming and wanted no part of it. The door opened and Mr. Collins, the family lawyer, stepped out. He was in his 60s, gray hair thinning, but his posture carried the weight of authority. "Mr. Harris," he said softly, glancing at me with something like pity. "We're ready." We followed him into the conference room. The air felt heavier in there, thick with expectation. The long mahogany table gleamed under the yellow glow of the chandelier, and a stack of papers lay neatly arranged in the center. I sat at one end of the table, Jason at the other. The distance between us felt symbolic, like an invisible wall had grown over the years. As Mr. Collins began reading, his voice was steady, professional, and coldly detached. He recited the usual formalities, the legal language that made everything sound clinical rather than human. But each word hit me like a reminder that Emily was truly gone. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing her handwriting, the way she always signed birthday cards with a little heart over the I in her name. That small detail hurt more than I could explain. The first part of the will was what I expected: final wishes, small bequests to close friends, sentimental items distributed to extended family. Jason shifted impatiently, his jaw tightening, as though he couldn't care less about any of that. And then came the pause. "Now," Mr. Collins said, adjusting his glasses, "regarding the estate." Jason leaned forward, his phone finally forgotten, his entire body bristling with anticipation. His eyes flicked to mine, and I swear I saw a smirk tug at his lips, like he already knew he'd won something. The lawyer continued, "Emily Harris leaves the family home, valued at $640,000, to her husband, Michael Harris." Jason slammed his hand on the table. "What?" His voice cracked, sharp and hostile, cutting through the room. Melissa flinched, lowering her eyes to the table as if she could disappear into the polished wood. "Jason," I said softly, trying to calm him, "this is not the time." "No," he snapped, pointing a finger at me. "You don't deserve it. Mom promised me the house. She told me herself." The words hit me like a knife. My chest tightened, not because of the accusation, but because of the cold certainty in his tone. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. "Mr. Harris, please. This is not the appropriate setting for interruptions." But Jason wasn't listening. He pushed back his chair, standing to his full height, his face flushed with rage. "You think you're going to sit there, all pitiful and grieving, and walk away with everything while I get scraps? I'm her son. I'm supposed to have it all." His voice echoed against the paneled walls, raw and venomous. I looked at him, not just at the angry man towering over me, but at the little boy I once carried on my shoulders through the county fair, the teenager I coached through his first heartbreak, the young man I had believed would stand by me when the time came. And now, here he was, demanding everything as though love, memory, and sacrifice meant nothing. Melissa whispered, "Jason, sit down, please." But he ignored her, his eyes locked on me with something darker than greed. For a moment, the room was utterly silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. And then Jason delivered the sentence that broke me. "She's gone, Dad. That house is mine now, whether you like it or not." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, cold, entitled, without even a flicker of grief for the woman who had raised him. I felt the air leave my lungs. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I knew this wasn't going to be a quiet reading of a will, but a war. And in that instant, a decision began to form inside me. One I never thought I'd have to make against my own flesh and blood. A decision that would tear our family apart forever. Jason's words hung in the air like a bitter fog, impossible to ignore. "That house is mine now, whether you like it or not." The sound of his voice still echoed inside my head as I stared across the polished mahogany table at him. For a brief moment, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, my palms slick with sweat. But beneath the shock was something even heavier: betrayal. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. "Jason," I began carefully, "your mother left that house to me. You don't have to like it, but you need to respect her decision." He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was sharp, humorless, cutting through me like a blade. "Respect," he sneered. "Don't lecture me about respect. I gave Mom everything she asked for, and you, what did you do? You're just an old man who's sitting on something that should have been mine years ago." Melissa shifted uncomfortably beside him, her hands wringing together in her lap. "Jason, please," she whispered, her eyes darting toward me with what looked like guilt. But Jason wasn't listening. He leaned across the table, his knuckles pressing against the surface, his posture aggressive. "Here's how this is going to work," he said, his voice low and firm. "You sign over the deed to me, and in return, I'll let you stay in the house until you can't anymore." I blinked, stunned. "You'll let me?" "Yes," he said coldly, crossing his arms. "I don't want to throw you out. You're my father, and I'm not heartless. But the house belongs to me. You can live there rent-free for now. I think that's generous." Generous. The word rattled around in my head. Absurd and insulting. That home wasn't just wood and brick. It was where Emily and I raised Jason, where we celebrated birthdays, where she planted her roses every spring. It was ours. And now, my own son spoke about it like he was doing me a favor. I sat back down, my body heavy with disbelief. "You have no right to make demands like this. This isn't about property, it's about family. About honoring your mother." His eyes hardened. "Don't you dare hide behind Mom's memory. She wanted me to have everything. You're twisting her wishes to your advantage." I shook my head slowly. "No, Jason. You're twisting her memory because you can't see past your own greed." The words lit a fire in him. He slammed his fist on the table so hard the stack of papers jumped. Mr. Collins flinched but remained silent, his eyes shifting nervously between us. Jason's face was flushed red, his jaw tight. "You think you're better than me? You think you can sit there and tell me I'm greedy? You've held me back my entire life, Dad. Every time I wanted to make something of myself, you were there, telling me to slow down, to be careful, to settle for less. Well, I'm not settling anymore. This is my chance, and I won't let you stand in my way." The words pierced me deeper than I expected. Held him back? I had worked myself to the bone at that factory, so he could go to college. I skipped vacations, sold my truck, even pulled overtime shifts to pay his tuition when scholarships fell short. I remembered late nights at the kitchen table, Emily and I counting out bills and coins just to make sure Jason had what he needed. And now, he twisted all of that sacrifice into resentment. I opened my mouth to respond, but my voice faltered. For a moment, I couldn't find the words. My chest ached with the weight of disappointment, a kind that no father should ever have to feel. Melissa reached for Jason's arm gently, but he shrugged her off. "Stop defending him." He snapped at her, then turned his glare back to me. "If you don't hand over that house, I'll make things very difficult for you. Don't test me, Dad." The venom in his voice shocked even Melissa. "Jason," she hissed, her face pale. "Do you even hear yourself? He's your father." But Jason wasn't backing down. His eyes locked on mine, unblinking, determined. "You're weak," he said, each word deliberate. "You're clinging to something you don't deserve. And if you think you can stop me, you're wrong." Silence filled the room again. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, each beat echoing like a warning. This wasn't just a heated argument. This was a declaration of war from my own son. Finally, I spoke, my voice low but steady. "You've made yourself clear, Jason. But let me make something clear to you. That house is more than just property. It's a lifetime of love, sweat, and memories. It's the place your mother and I built together. And I won't let you rip it away, because you've decided respect doesn't matter anymore." He smirked, leaning back in his chair as though he had already won. "We'll see." The meeting ended in uneasy silence. Mr. Collins shuffled the papers awkwardly, clearly wishing he could vanish from the tension. Melissa lingered by the doorway, her face etched with conflict, before following Jason out into the hall. When the door closed behind them, the room felt unbearably empty. I sat there for a long time, staring at the polished surface of the table, trying to understand how love between father and son could unravel so quickly, so brutally. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a cold resolve began to take root inside me. Jason's demands, his disrespect, they had lit a fire I never thought I'd feel toward my own flesh and blood. What he didn't realize was that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. When the heavy wooden door closed behind Jason and Melissa, the silence that followed pressed down on me like a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. The echo of his words, sharp, venomous, still clung to the air, and though my body wanted to collapse, my mind refused to rest. I sat in that chair at Mr. Collins's office longer than I should have, staring at the grooves in the polished table, my thoughts chasing themselves in circles. I could have gone straight home, but I didn't. My truck waited in the parking lot, the late afternoon sun throwing long shadows across the asphalt. Instead of turning the key in the ignition, I leaned forward, pressing my hands against the steering wheel, trying to calm the storm rising inside me. My chest tightened with every memory of Jason as a boy, his laughter as he ran across our yard, the way he used to climb onto my lap after a long day at the factory just to tell me about his school friends. Those memories now clashed violently against the man I had just faced, a man who looked me in the eye and threatened to take everything away. After what felt like an eternity, I finally started the engine, but instead of heading home, I drove aimlessly through the streets of town. The familiar storefronts blurred past me. Henderson's hardware store, the diner where Emily and I used to share pie after church, the park where Jason learned to ride his bike. Each place carried ghosts of a time when life felt simpler, safer. I was searching for something, though I didn't yet know what. I ended up at the cemetery. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I pulled up beside the narrow path that led to Emily's grave. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the rows of stones stretching across the green hillside. Finally, I forced myself out of the truck, my legs heavy, my heart heavier still. When I reached her stone, I couldn't hold it in anymore. My knees buckled, and I lowered myself to the grass, running my fingers over her name etched in cold marble. "Emily," I whispered, my voice breaking. "What did we do wrong with him?" The breeze rustled the leaves above me, and for a fleeting second, I almost imagined she was answering back. I bowed my head, speaking as though she were sitting right there beside me. "He doesn't see what this house means. He doesn't see what we gave up for him. I tried, Emily. I tried to be the father he needed, but now he looks at me like I'm nothing but an obstacle." Tears pricked my eyes, but I fought them back, my jaw trembling as I pressed my forehead to the cool stone. "You left me this house. You trusted me to protect what we built. And I will, Emily. I promise you that." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the cemetery. I sat there until the air turned cool and the crickets began their chorus. It was in that quiet moment that I realized something important. Rushing into anger wouldn't serve me. Jason had stormed out with threats, but I couldn't fight him on his terms. Not yet. I needed time. I needed to pause, to gather myself before the storm ahead. When I finally pulled myself back up, brushing the dirt from my pants, I felt a strange sense of calm settle in. Not peace, not yet, but the kind of clarity that comes when you know the battle hasn't been lost, only delayed. I drove home with steadier hands. The house stood tall against the fading light, its white siding glowing faintly. The front porch where Emily used to sip her morning coffee, now bathed in shadows. I sat on the porch steps for a long time, staring at the front door, remembering how many times Jason had run through it with scraped knees and wild stories. This was more than a house. It was a lifeline to everything I had been, everything Emily and I had built together. Inside, the air felt still, almost protective. I made myself a simple dinner, eggs and toast, but barely touched it. Instead, I wandered through the rooms, pausing in the living room where Emily's rocking chair still sat by the window, then in Jason's old bedroom, now filled with boxes I never unpacked after he moved out. My hand lingered on the doorframe, and I whispered under my breath, "You're not taking this from me, son. Not this." That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, Jason's voice replaying in my head. Every demand, every insult cut deeper in the silence of my bedroom. I rose before dawn, restless, pacing the hallway until the first light seeped through the curtains. By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit in the house, waiting for Jason's next move. I needed perspective. So I walked into town, my boots crunching against the gravel shoulder of the road. At the diner, familiar faces greeted me. Clara, the waitress who had known Emily and me for decades, poured me a coffee without asking. "You look tired, Frank," she said softly, setting the mug in front of me. I gave her a small, weary smile. "Been a long few days." She hesitated, studying me with the kind of quiet concern only old friends can carry. "If you ever need to talk." I nodded but said nothing more. Some battles were too private to spill across a diner counter. Still, the warmth of the coffee, the hum of voices, and the clink of silverware offered me something I hadn't felt since the will was read. A pause. A space where the weight lifted, even if just for a moment. As I walked home later, the crisp morning air filling my lungs, I realized this pause was more than a break in the storm. It was a gift. A chance to steady myself, to think before the next clash. Jason had demanded everything. He had disrespected me in ways I never thought possible. But the battle wasn't over, not yet. For now, I held on to the silence, knowing it wouldn't last. The pause was unexpected, yes, but it gave me something I desperately needed, strength. The room had gone silent, as if the very air had thickened and wrapped itself around us. I sat there, gripping the armrest of my chair, watching my son's eyes dart nervously toward the lawyer. He had expected the will to be straightforward, easy to bend to his advantage. But that pause, deliberate and heavy, had shifted everything. The lawyer cleared his throat, his glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose. "There's more," he said slowly, letting the words hang in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. My heart pounded, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I leaned forward, not because I wanted to hear, but because I had to. He pulled out an envelope, sealed with the kind of care that only my wife could have given. Her handwriting stretched across the front, elegant, steady, for my husband, and only him. I froze. My son frowned, his lips tightening as though he had been caught off guard. His wife shifted uncomfortably beside him, clearly sensing the weight of something she had not anticipated. The lawyer continued, "This was left specifically for you, Mr. Walker. Your wife insisted it be opened only at this point in the reading." My fingers trembled as I reached out and accepted the envelope. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried every unspoken word she had never managed to say aloud. I glanced at my son, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, but for once, he didn't speak. I opened it slowly, carefully peeling back the seal, as though tearing it too quickly would destroy the fragile piece of her that remained. Inside was a folded letter, neatly written in the same familiar hand. I began to read aloud, though my voice faltered at first. My dearest John, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I know this day would come, but I wanted to leave you with something only you would understand. Our life together was built on trust, sacrifice, and love. I could not let those values be destroyed, not even by family. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in on me. My son shifted impatiently in his chair, but I ignored him. My wife's words carried me back to the many nights we'd sat side by side, dreaming of a future that seemed simple but was always hard one. I know how much you sacrificed for this family, and I also know the pain you carried quietly when things did not turn out the way you hoped with our son. He may not see it now, but one day, truth has a way of surfacing. At that line, my voice caught. My son's face reddened, and he leaned forward as if to interrupt, but the lawyer raised his hand gently, signaling for silence. I swallowed hard and continued. That is why I have chosen to create something separate. Hidden within my estate is an account, one that no one knows about but you and the lawyer seated with you now. This account contains the savings and investments I built over years, little by little. It is not vast, but it is secure. And it is meant for you, John, for your care, your dignity, and your peace of mind. I lowered the letter for a moment. My chest felt tight, both from grief and from an overwhelming surge of gratitude. She had thought of me. She had protected me, even in silence, even when I hadn't realized she'd been preparing for this. My son slammed his palm on the table. This is ridiculous, he barked. Mom wouldn't hide money from us. She wouldn't do this. But the lawyer's calm voice cut through the tension. It was her explicit instruction. These funds are legally untouchable, designed solely for your father's well-being. The words hit my son like cold water, but instead of softening him, they seemed to harden every line of his face. He clenched his fists, muttering under his breath, his anger rolling off him like heat. I picked the letter back up, determined to finish her words. Do not let anyone make you feel guilty for this. You have given everything to this family, and you deserve to rest knowing you are cared for. Use it wisely, and do not let greed poison what remains. This is my last gift to you, my love. My hand shook as I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. The lawyer leaned back, giving me a moment of silence. But the silence didn't last long. My son shot up from his chair. So that's it. You get everything, and we get scraps? After all I've done? After all the promises I made? I rose slowly, my legs unsteady, but my resolve firm. I met his eyes, not with anger, but with the weary strength of a father who had carried too much for too long. You promised to take care of me, I said quietly, but it seems your mother knew better than to trust those promises. His wife tugged at his arm, whispering for him to sit back down, but he pulled away, pacing like a man cornered by his own shadow. The lawyer cleared his throat again, producing another document. There's one final clause, he said. Mrs. Walker specified that any attempt to contest her wishes would result in the forfeiture of your portion entirely. Her words were exact. If he cannot respect my husband, he cannot respect my memory. The impact of those words hung in the air like a thunderclap. My son's face drained of color. He sank back into his chair, muttering curses under his breath, but powerless now. For the first time in that suffocating room, I felt the faintest lift in my chest. Not victory, not triumph, but the bittersweet relief of knowing my wife had not left me defenseless. She had given me not just protection, but dignity. I pressed the envelope to my chest again, whispering under my breath so only I could hear. Thank you, Margaret. The lawyer began gathering the documents, signaling that the reading was finished. My son sat in silence, his anger simmering beneath the surface, while his wife avoided my eyes completely. As we stood to leave, I knew one thing with certainty. The battle wasn't over. My son's pride wouldn't let this go quietly. But my wife's revelation had changed the ground beneath us. For once, I wasn't stepping into the storm empty-handed. The drive back from the lawyer's office felt longer than it should have. The sky was overcast, clouds dragging across the horizon like heavy curtains, and my son's silence sat in the car like an unwelcome passenger. He didn't speak, not a word, just stared out the window with his jaw locked tight. His wife's nervous cough broke the silence once or twice, but even she seemed too afraid to address him. When we finally pulled into my driveway, the tension followed us inside. I moved slowly, my knees aching as I settled into my chair by the window. This house, my house, suddenly felt less like a home and more like a battlefield. I could feel his anger radiating across the room as he tossed his coat on the sofa, pacing back and forth like a man searching for a way to strike. "Dad," he finally said, his voice sharp and bitter. "This isn't over. That lawyer, that letter, it doesn't change what's right. I'm your son. I should have control. I should have everything." I met his eyes. "What you should have," I said carefully, "is respect. And that's the one thing you've been unwilling to give." His laugh was harsh, cold. "Respect? You think that pays bills? You think respect puts food on the table? You think Mom cared more about that than me building a future for my family?" I shook my head slowly. "She cared about both. But she saw through the way you looked at me, as if I was a burden instead of your father. She saw it long before I admitted it to myself." He stopped pacing, his face hardening. "You're saying she picked you over me?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "She picked honesty over greed. She picked love over power. And she picked dignity over control." The words stung him. I could see it in the way his mouth tightened. But instead of softening, he doubled down. "You think you're strong now because you've got her little hidden account. Don't fool yourself. You wouldn't last a day without me helping you." I leaned forward in my chair, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through his arrogance. "I lasted a lifetime without your help. I built this family when you were still learning to walk. And your mother and I gave you every chance to stand tall on your own. If you see me as weak, that's your blindness, not my reality." His wife finally spoke up, her tone trembling. "Maybe we should just drop this. Maybe your mom knew what she was doing." But he snapped at her. "Stay out of this." Then he turned back to me. His eyes were wild, desperate, like a man watching the last of his control slip through his fingers. "You'll regret this," he said. "I'll find a way to get what's mine. You'll see." I stood, my legs heavy, but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said, my voice firm. "What's yours is already written. And what's mine, what your mother entrusted to me, is something you can never steal. Because it wasn't money she left me, not really. It was trust. And that's worth more than anything you're chasing." For a moment, the room was silent. His anger seemed to falter, though pride wouldn't let him admit it. He grabbed his coat and stormed out, his wife trailing behind him, her eyes filled with something between sorrow and relief. When the door slammed, the quiet that followed was unlike any I had felt before. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the first step toward it. I sat back down, pulling my wife's letter from my pocket. I read it again, slower this time, letting every word sink in. Each sentence carried her presence, her foresight, her unwavering belief in me. It was as though she had known this day would come, and she had armed me not with wealth, but with strength I had forgotten I had. That night, I walked out onto the porch. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. I looked up at the dark sky, whispering her name like a prayer. "Margaret, you were right. He wasn't ready. But I am. And I'll carry this, not as a weight, but as proof that love outlasts everything." The house felt different afterward. Not emptier, not colder, but steadier, like its foundation had been rebuilt. My son might come back one day, or he might never step through that door again. But either way, I was no longer standing in the shadow of his demands. I was standing in the light of her final gift. And for the first time since she left this world, I felt something close to peace. My son thought he could take everything from me. But what he didn't realize is that the most powerful inheritance isn't wealth, it's dignity. And that he'll never own.